Arkansas City, Kansas. Ark City to locals. Where everyone knows your name. And Friday Night Lights is a religion. Jody Sanderholm is a devoted daughter and sister, the determined star of the Cowley County Tigerettes dance team, and the valedictorian of her high school class.
At times, high school was hard, but we all had one thing in common that kept us going: our futures.
That's why, on January 5th, 2007, when Jody disappears without a trace, it's so out of character that it catches her family by surprise.
My name is Jennifer Aldridge, and I am Jody's sister. I was pregnant with a little girl, and it is all Jody could talk about. That day, I actually went out to eat lunch with a friend, and then we went and walked around the mall. She was convinced that we were going to walk the mall until I went into labor. I was in a store shopping when my mom called me a little after noon and said, "Hey, call your sister. I've tried a couple times to call her. She's not answering my phone call. She'll answer if you call. She'll think you're in labor." I called, and it went to voicemail.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
I waited about 5 minutes or so, and it just didn't sit right with me. So I called again, and she didn't answer. I called my mom right back, and I said, "Something is wrong."
With her busy life, Jody's days are scheduled down to the minute, and she never misses an appointment.
Jody was a college student, and so she had her classes in the morning, and then she had dance practice with the college dance team. She would get done around lunchtime, and she would go home and shower after practice and eat lunch and get ready for the rest of her day.
But today, there's a noticeable break in her routine.
I'm Brian Sanderholm, Jody's dad. Every day she'd show back home for lunch, so she'd get the mail and bring it in and put it on the kitchen counter and go on with her day.
The mail was out of the mailbox, but the mail was not in the house, so we knew that she had made it to the mailbox, but not inside of the house.
To Jody's family, this is a huge red flag. And when she hasn't shown up by dinner time, they call the police.
My name's Sean Wallace, and I was the chief of police of the Arkansas City Police Department in 2007. Ark City, it's a tight-knit community. There's about 13,000 people that live there. It's enough people that you know a lot of people, but you can't know everybody. I was in my office, and the phone rang, and it was Brian Sanderholm. Jody actually went to high school with one of my sons. So I had a pretty good relationship with the Sanderholms. Brian, he was distraught when he called me, and he said, I can't find Jody. Jody's missing.
I thought maybe something had just gone astray. Maybe her car broke down. Maybe she couldn't use her cell phone to call us for one reason or another.
I tried to assure him. I said, we get these calls all the time, and 99.9% of the time, it's a miscommunication or something happened in this teenager's life that you weren't quite aware of.
But Brian Sanderholm insists that isn't Jody.
Our relationship with Jody wasn't like that, where she would just run off.
I said, I'm going to send a policeman to you to take a report, and so we can start investigating where she might be at.
Meanwhile, Jody's family starts to hypothesize. Could Jody be with someone? Did someone take her? Because Jody had a lot of admirers.
The Tigerette dance team was a pretty well-known dance group in the community.
Could one of them have turned obsessive and kidnapped her? Or maybe the answer is closer to home, because Jody has a longtime boyfriend named Colby.
When she brought Colby home the first time, I thought the world of him. I really did.
He had been around at that point for 5 or 6 years. So he was one of us.
Right now, anything is possible. But the detectives have to start by looking in the obvious places. Retracing Jody's daily routine.
Her last whereabouts was a dance line practice. When we took the report, then the patrol officers were instructed to go out and talk to the other dance line girls, because maybe they know where she's at. The dance line girls knew she hadn't showed up for a couple appointments, but they had no idea where she was at.
The investigators gather as much information as they can from Jody's teammates and get names of people seen hanging out at rehearsals. But the team doesn't recall anyone unusual lately. Now everyone, even Chief Wallace, goes out looking for Jody.
Most of the community comes out for high school basketball games. So I go to the basketball game because I'm thinking maybe she'll show up at the basketball game. She was kind of quasi-coaching the high school dance line. And she did not show up. And I talked to several students. None of them could give me any idea of where she might be. That evening, we started an all-out search.
At that point, I was honestly still thinking she was in a car wreck. Her car is turned over in a ditch somewhere and she cannot get out. She needs help. She's probably bleeding to death. We have to find her. My dad was driving up and down every alley in the town. He was driving on every dirt road, every country road, searching for her car.
I had friends show up at my house that we loaded up in their truck and took off, looking everywhere we could look.
We asked the county to look in the ditches along the 77 highway and main routes, but we did not find anything. Did not find her vehicle, did not find any signs of an accident.
My mom and dad obviously were up all night, the first night she went missing. And it was probably around 4 o'clock in the morning when my dad knew that the local news in Wichita, that they would be getting to the news station. At that point, she had been gone for 14 hours. So we figured we've got to get the news out.
19-year-old Jody Sanderholm finishes dance practice. She's supposed to meet a friend for lunch, but never shows. Flyers with Jody's picture and description are posted everywhere. Police also asked for help finding Jody's car, telling residents in rural Cowley County to search their properties.
The investigators' next stop is Jody's longtime boyfriend, Colby.
You're something special. You're something else. You got me feeling.
One of the first things we thought about was that teenagers sometimes do crazy things. Maybe something's going on with their boyfriend.
Jody and Colby had actually started dating in 8th grade. They were in love, and not a normal teenage love. It was an adult, forever love. They were going to get married. They were going to have children.
Could Jody and Colby's storybook romance have secretly crumbled? Colby is an obvious person for the police to question, if they can find him.
We knew Colby as well and his family, but we also found out he was in Texas.
Is Colby's absence a case of sheer coincidence or perfect timing? Police race to find him, as they can't help but wonder if he holds the answer to Jody's disappearance.
We realized at that point there was something wrong, and it was going to be bad.
Jody Sanderholm, the determined dancer and star student, is missing, seemingly vanished into thin air, leaving her family and community in utter disbelief.
Our Kansas City epitomizes small-town rural Kansas. My name is Michael Schwenke. I'm an anchor and investigative reporter with KWCH, the CBS affiliate in Wichita. Literally, people go to bed at night and don't lock their cars. And some don't even lock the doors to their houses because there's that much trust. It's one of those towns that everyone rallies together. Friday night football, for example. And I think everyone there watches out for everyone. It is a family in a sense.
So when Jody goes missing, almost everybody has a theory.
I put a police officer on a phone, a line that he would answer, and take all the leads that the community would give him. Some of them told us she was in Hawaii and things like that. And, those went to the bottom of the pile.
But there's one lead in particular that the investigators are eager to follow up on. Jody's boyfriend, Colby, who's coincidentally in Texas.
I think it's fair to say that when someone like Jody disappears, the fingers always go to the boyfriend first.
Jody and Colby, at that point, they had been together for 5 or 6 years. He was sticking around here waiting for her to finish up at Cali, and he said he was in Texas visiting his brother.
Investigators get to work confirming Colby's story.
He returned to town, and he was interviewed by one of our detectives. We would encourage him, look, nobody's in trouble. If you guys got something going on that you needed to be together and you don't want the Sanderholms to know, you can tell us. We just want to find her. It's like, I have no idea where she's at. He acted very concerned about where she might be.
The anxiety that has taken over the Sanderholm family has become too much to bear.
Saturday morning, around 9 o'clock, my mother-in-law came over to the house. And at that point, she said, you need to go to the hospital. You have not slept. You are not eating. You are not drinking water. You are now 3 days overdue. So I went to the hospital. And they said, yep, you're in active labor. God gives you a baby when you need a baby. And God knew we needed that baby right then to keep my mom sane, to keep my mom alive.
I am Emma Jolie Mayfield, and I am Jody Sanderholm's niece. Her name was Jody Leanne, and my middle name is Jolie, is a combination of Jody and Leanne. She was so excited to be an aunt, and she told my mom that as soon as she found out that she was in labor, that she was going to drive all the way up to Kansas City to come be with her. My mom tried so hard to be strong for everyone, and she recently told me that she didn't even tell her mom that she was in labor because she just wanted her to focus on my aunt. And I just can't imagine keeping such an important part of your life a secret because you don't want to take away from the tragedy that's happening in your life.
The birth of Jody's niece provides a small glimmer of hope for the Sanderholm family. And nearly 24 hours after Jody's disappearance, investigators double back to a person Jody's teammates mentioned the day before. There's a Tigerettes fan who the girls think is a little too interested.
They start pointing a finger at this guy, Justin Thurber, because they would see him almost every day around the dance line practice. He watches us practice, and then they tell us stories. He followed me home. He was following me, and I had to pull into the police station to get away from him. We knew Justin as kind of a petty criminal. He would get caught with some weed or shoplifting. He'd get into arguments with his girlfriend, and we get called.
And it just so happens that the police have had a recent run-in with Justin. Justin
called around to the bondsman to ask him if he can work for them to go out and capture bond jumpers. He had this dream of being Dog the Bounty Hunter. But they said, if you capture somebody that has jumped our bond, we'll pay you a little something if you bring them in, but we can't take you on the payroll. Now, about a week before Jody disappeared, we got a call at a house that there was an individual there claiming to be an Ark City detective. Justin thought there was somebody in this house that had jumped bond for one of the local bondsmen, and so he was trying to get in there.
Ark City Police charged Thurber for impersonating a police officer.
That was the only kind of contact we'd had with Justin.
Justin's criminal history doesn't sound major league, but he's one of the only leads the investigators have got, and they're going to have to find him. But just then, another unexpected tip comes in. Someone saw Jody in her car on the day she went missing.
A witness that knew Jody see her at Kansas Avenue, which turns into 166. She sees Jody in the passenger seat and a male driving who she didn't recognize. She tries to call Jody, and Jody didn't answer the phone.
A broken routine, a missed call, and a small town mystery that has everyone on edge. Who is the stranger behind the wheel, and where was he taking Jody? The answers lead the investigators on a wild chase to unimaginable places and an unthinkable end. It's January 6th, and Jody Sanderholm has been missing for more than a day. The authorities are racing to follow up on a tip about a possible sighting of Jody heading out of town with a male mystery driver. But first, they need to pay a visit to Justin Thurber, the dance line fan who Jody's teammates think could be involved.
So Lieutenant Byrd goes up and knocks on the door. Says to him, Justin, look, we need to talk some more about your case last week for impersonating a police officer. Can I come in and talk to you about that? And so he comes in and he asks a few questions. Pretty girl with dark hair.
When investigators ask him about his whereabouts, Justin has a quick answer.
I was out past the state lake with some guys, and he mentions their names, and we got stuck in the mud. And I got angry, we had a little argument, so I just started walking home, and when I got by the state lake, I called my dad. And his dad was there in the house and said, yeah, he called me and he was wet and muddy, and so I went out and picked him up.
Justin seems to have an alibi the day Jody went missing, and investigators have no reason to believe that his father would lie. The detectives make a note to double-check his story and turn back to Jody's boyfriend, Colby.
I was convinced it had to be somebody she knew in some way, had some attachment to, and which is why the first suspect's going to be a significant other, a boyfriend.
But Colby's digital footprint proves he was in Dallas, just like he said.
Agent Folletti of the Kansas Bureau of Investigation was able to determine that Colby was, at least his phone, was in Dallas, Texas. Then you confirm that with the people he's with. Then you confirm that with credit card receipts where he's purchased gas or food in that area and not in anywhere near Ark City. There was nothing to indicate that he was involved in any way.
So with Colby in the clear and no new information about the mystery car, it seems like investigators are at a dead end.
I can only do so much. I can only say so much to make.
As soon as we began our coverage on that Saturday, it feels like we had been there for weeks because of how the community was rallying around Jody.
In the meantime, a community pulls together, praying for Jody's safe return at nightly vigils.
And there was still this sense of hope, and it was real. There was a real hope in the initial hours after her disappearance, because everyone was working together to find her.
By the following day, there is still no sign of Jody. She has been missing for 2 days. Her family is getting desperate.
I was just on the phone constantly with my mom. Have you heard from her? Have you heard from her? She was not answering.
Hoping to provide Jody's family with answers, detectives look deeper into the one person with a record, Justin Thurber.
Agent Folletti went about clearing those 3 friends that he said he was with east of town by the state lake. One was in Texas. We confirmed that with cell phone records, credit card receipts. One was getting a marriage license at the courthouse. I think one of them said he's a weirdo. I don't have anything to do with him. So he's lied to us now.
With his alibi falling apart, the investigators zero in on Justin Thurber. If he does have something to do with Jody's disappearance, it's critical that they get him in custody as soon as they can.
Asked the county attorney, is there a warrant filed yet on the impersonated police officer? And he made sure there was, so we arrested him on that warrant. And we developed probable cause to get a search warrant on his house based on all these little things that are pointing towards him. We collected his Adidas shoes, the clothes that he said he had on that night, and some other pieces of evidence.
Investigators won't be able to hold Thurber for long on this minor, unrelated charge. And they still have nothing that links him to Jody's disappearance.
We contacted Thurber's ex-girlfriend because we thought maybe she might give us some insight into his thinking. He had gotten violent with her, both physically and sexually. So that's starting to cause us some concern that there's a propensity here in Justin Thurber we didn't know about. And so I asked one of the lieutenants, put her in your car, ask her to take you everywhere he likes to go. So they go to a few places in town, but then she takes him east of town out into the Call Wildlife area, and they go down a dirt road, and she points back into that area, and she says, he told me one time that you could kill somebody and put them in there and they'd never find the body. Well, of course, that perks up our radar. First thing we did Sunday morning after breaking the briefing is send out a detective from the Arkansas City Police Department to the Call Wildlife area. And then it was only a few minutes, and he called me on his cell phone and said, we need to get the trackers out here because there's shoe impressions that have an Adidas emblem in them, just like the Adidas that we collected from Justin Thurber's house. And he goes, and there's another shoe impression that looks like it could be a flip-flop.
With no time to lose, investigators send a tracking expert.
My name's Ron Cannon. I was a senior instructor for the Cali Trackers. Tracking is a lost art. It's viable for collecting evidence of crime scenes.
So they pull into the state lake and they get down to a camping-style toilet, a pit toilet. And they see the remnants, muddy remnants of the same shoe impression they're following.
And very low lighting, so I got my flashlight out, shined it around. I walked over to the first toilet. And that's where I noticed Brian Sanderholm's mail sticking up.
The Sanderholms' missing mail, that small break in Jody's routine that first set off her family's alarm bells, has been found. And it's an awful sign of more to come.
It's just evil. Pure evil. There's no reason for it.
It's been 2 days since Jody Sanderholm disappeared. Last seen in her own car, being driven out of town by an unknown male. After learning that Justin Thurber likes to visit an isolated nature preserve in the same direction Jody was going, law enforcement has uncovered the first evidence of Jody's possible whereabouts.
It was addressed to Brian and Cindy Sanderholm, had their address on it. It's laying on top of feces and it's floating there. We knew that Jody's routine was go straight to the mailbox, get the mail, then go inside her house.
That missing mail, the first clue that tipped off Jody's family that something was wrong, has been found. Chief Wallace races to the scene.
So then I looked in the other toilet down in there, and I saw a flip-flop. There's a flip-flop down there, just one. And then I saw what could have been a leotard. And when we start dragging out stuff, and I look back in there and I see the color orange. I thought, there's something orange back there. I said, what can that be? And so I asked the fire chief who was there. I said, hook that, let's see what that is. And as he's pulling it in, it hits me what it is. That's her Tiger Ed jacket. Our investigators collect all that evidence, the mail and all the clothes and the shoes, and we call it a night. Came back in like at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning just to get prepared because I knew I needed to contact the Sanderholms.
Well, that's about when the world shifted on us. Once we found out that the mail and her clothes were in the outhouse, there was no reason for that other than something terrible.
Now a potential crime scene, the Kaw Wildlife Area becomes the focus of a determined search. At first, it seems like the trail has gone cold. But on the second day of the search, the authorities bring in a dive team to scan the lake.
So they come to the state lake and put the boat in, turn on their sonar, and in about 30 seconds they said, her car's right there. And they sent in their diver and took photographs of the car.
With the discovery of Jody's car, the fear that her body may be inside grows. As police prepare to drag the car out from the depths of the lake, they brace themselves for the answer.
We pull it out of the lake. There's no body. She wasn't in the car.
With no human remains, the tracking team keeps looking, and they soon pick up on a new trail.
We had 2 impressions together, and we were looking for a flip-flop and a tennis shoe, and they were together. Right where I'm standing, this area was damp soil. So instead of seeing scuff marks coming down off the road, now we're starting to pick up enough footprint impression that we can see a geometric design in the footwear.
One of the things that they informed us by radio and cell phone is that, hey, we've stopped seeing the flip-flops. We just get into the woods and the flip-flops disappear. But the Adidas continues deeper into the woods.
So we're going to come off the road into the wooded area and start continuing the footprint trail into the woods.
And then, a gruesome discovery.
Okay, this is the location. The tree limbs and brush were all gathered in a pretty large area right here, and then brought together. And the first thing that we saw when we got that close was her hand sticking out of the brush pile. Well, there was a big hesitation with all 4 of the trackers. Obviously, we'd found Jody, and so we just took a moment. Like I'm doing right now. Pretty emotional for all 4 of us. So we didn't want to bring any evidence into the crime scene, so we stopped right here.
The trackers call in what they found.
This is when I get the phone call, Chief, we found her. It was so wooded, such a remote, thick area. They had to cut down trees to get their vehicles in there to process the scene properly. And also in the course of that, we found an area where there was a hair tie, some hair, and it just looked like a scuffle had occurred right there. She was underneath a pile of tree logs. The reason they saw her is because she had one hand sticking out of this pile of logs. It was like she was saying, "Here I am, come find me." And when they removed all the logs from her, she was posed, no clothes on. The crime scene was the most horrific crime scene I've ever seen. And I've seen humans do a lot of awful things to each other. Before her body was ever left the scene, I go straight to the Sanderholms house. And I sit down with them and I tell them, we have found Jody and she's deceased in the Kala Wildlife Area. Right now we're working the crime scene. As soon as we can, we're gonna get her out of there and we're gonna send her up for an autopsy and to collect evidence that's on her body.
Well, I can remember it, but I can't tell you any thoughts that I had in my mind. It was just all over with. It was probably 3 years after that point in time where my life was just a blur.
I had learned that her body had been found and that she was naked. And so obviously to me, I knew that she had been sexually assaulted. I remember a thought of like absolute horror. How did I bring a baby into this awful, scary world? How could I bring a baby into this world where there's rape and murder?
The news of the discovery of Jody's body is crushing. But can any of this be linked to Justin Thurber? Once again, they turn to the trackers, who discover a critical new piece of evidence.
We sent the trackers over to the mailbox area and the area around Jody's house. Well, they found shoe impressions across the street from Jody's house that were consistent with the shoe impressions they were finding out at the Kala Wildlife scene. That told us that that's probably where he abducted her, right at her house.
On June 9th, 2007, police charged Justin Thurber for the rape and murder of Jody Sanderholm. But what the detectives and Jody's family soon learn is that there are more horrific secrets to uncover. Secrets that suggest Justin is even more dangerous than anyone could believe.
I learned that Justin Thurber had stalked me from the time that I was 13 years old.
Police finally know the fate of 19-year-old Jody Sanderholm after finding her body concealed in a nearby nature preserve. Viciously assaulted and murdered by Justin Thurber.
As soon as they discover Jody, there are two storylines. One still centers around Jody and who she was, the impact she had on the community, because immediately the town shifts into mourning.
She was very committed and one of the most consistent people that I've ever met in my life.
Then the other storyline turns to the suspect in this case and the absolute brutality as the details start to come out and how he killed Jody.
It was discovered that her cause of death was ligature strangulation because she still had the marks of either a cord or a piece of clothing, something thin that was used to strangle her. Also, one of her major arteries in her neck had been severed. What the pathologist surmised is that she was hit hard enough to twist her head, enough to tear that artery. It was also evident that he had tortured her and raped her.
Why would a casual fan and an apparent stranger target and kill Jody?
And I remember I told my mom, I know the name, but I can't put a face to him. And she said, you graduated with him. Go get your yearbook out.
Little does the Sanderholm family realize, Justin Thurber has been nearby, lurking.
I went to school with him from kindergarten on. He was in my elementary school. I graduated high school with him, but I didn't really know him.
He just lived 2 blocks to the south of us. We knew nothing of him.
As prosecutors build their case, they make a chilling discovery. Jody was not the only Sanderholm Justin Thurber was stalking.
I learned that Justin Thurber had stalked me from the time that I was 13 years old. He started walking over to our house, sitting in the wooded area across the street from our house and watching us through the windows, watching me swim in the backyard. There were a lot of other females who he made uncomfortable, who he threatened, who he watched. I mean, this was definitely repetitive behavior, and it was escalating.
In February 2009, Justin Thurber stands trial for the rape and murder of Jody Sanderholm.
Both cases entitled State of Kansas versus Justin Eugene Thurber.
The prosecution presents evidence of how Justin quietly terrorized Ark City's young women, his obsession growing, until things finally went too far with Jody Sanderholm. In addition to the footprints outside her mailbox, they are able to prove that he was following her on the day she was murdered.
The day that Jody disappeared, we stopped him on campus and wrote him a traffic ticket. He would later claim he was never on campus, but we had video evidence that he was.
But the final piece of evidence, the one no one can argue against, comes from Jody herself. In an attempt to save her own life, Jody scratched her attacker, and that person's DNA was discovered under her fingernails.
We later sent that to the KBI lab in Topeka, where they did a DNA test. What the KB lab concluded in their analysis is that it had to be Justin Thurber.
By Jody's actions, she was able to show who her killer was. That right hand, as good as you can get.
We unanimously find the defendant guilty of capital murder of Jody Sanderholm.
Justin Thurber was convicted of first-degree murder with aggravating circumstances, aggravated rape, aggravated kidnapping, and sentenced to death by a jury of his peers.
Jody's determined spirit left a trail that helped catch her killer. It began with the mail she clung in her hand when Thurber abducted her, culminating with her defiant final show of strength.
In the end, it was Jody herself that led police to her killer. A girl who decides at some point in this crime that it was time to fight, and she did.
By the time this airs, it will be 17 years since my sister died, and he is still sitting on death row in Kansas, and we are in the middle of his appeal. I've gotten to a point where I don't allow him to control my thoughts, control my mind. I don't even really think about him that much. I think about my sister every day.
I know that if my aunt was here today, she would be my biggest supporter. For pageants, I spread the word about Jody's Law, which is a law that my family actually created and passed in Kansas and New Mexico that broadens the definition of stalking and makes it more easy to prosecute. And so no one has to go through what my aunt went through, and that we can make more women and men safe from any predator.
Not knowing what she became, what she was going to become, whether or not she'd have children now or have a big fancy career or whatever she'd be doing now. I want to know. It was very hard, but tried to find closure somewhere, but I just don't.
There is a profound and unsettling contrast between the natural beauty of the Pacific Islands and the dark, hidden realities that sometimes unfold behind the closed doors of their communities. American Samoa, an unincorporated territory of the United States located in the heart of the South Pacific Ocean, is often envisioned as a tranquil paradise. It is a place characterized by lush, emerald green mountains, pristine coastlines, and a deeply rooted Polynesian culture that places a strong emphasis on family, respect, and community harmony. In these tight-knit villages, everyone knows their neighbors. Life moves at a different pace, guided by ancient traditions and the rhythmic, calming sounds of the ocean. But on the night of June 11th, 2019, the village of Niuali, situated on the eastern part of Tutuila Island, was violently stripped of its peaceful facade. The events that transpired in a modest private residence that night would not only shatter a family, but also send shockwaves throughout the entire territory, forcing a society to confront a deeply ingrained, uncomfortable truth about the pervasive nature of domestic violence. This is the story of a home that was transformed into a place of unimaginable terror. It is the story of an irrational, blinding jealousy that escalated into an act of supreme brutality. Most importantly, it is the story of a 31-year-old mother whose life was taken far too soon, leaving behind 3 young children and a community grappling with grief and outrage. Welcome to the exploration of the Niuali domestic violence case, a tragedy that became a painful wake-up call for the island nation. To understand the gravity of this case, one must first look at the lives at the center of the storm. Fiapai Cruz was just 31 years old. In the prime of her life, she was defined by her role as a mother. She had 3 young children, and by all logical extensions of the human experience, those children were the absolute center of her universe. Motherhood is a demanding, all-encompassing journey, especially in a household with 3 young dependents. It requires endless patience, boundless love, and a fierce protective instinct. Fiapai was the primary source of comfort, guidance, and nurturing for her children. In the close-knit communities of American Samoa, family ties are everything. The extended family network is vast, but the bond between a mother and her young children remains the most foundational pillar of a child's early existence. Fiapai was that pillar. She was the one her children looked to for safety in a world that can often be unpredictable and frightening. On the other side of this marital dynamic was her husband, Thomas Cruz. At 36 years old, Thomas was supposed to be a partner, a provider, and a protector. In the traditional societal structures that govern much of the Pacific Islands, the role of the husband and father is heavily emphasized. The cultural norms often lean towards a patriarchal system, where the man is viewed as the undisputed head of the household. While this structure is deeply tied to historical traditions of leadership and family governance, it can also create a dangerous imbalance of power when distorted by individuals with controlling or abusive tendencies. The concept of male dominance, when taken to an extreme and corrupted by personal insecurities, can foster an environment where a woman's voice is marginalized and her autonomy is severely restricted. The dynamics within the Cruz household leading up to that fatal night were clouded by a dark, insidious force: jealousy. Jealousy is a complex and highly destructive human emotion. When it is ungrounded and unchecked, it acts like a slow-acting poison, corroding trust and replacing affection with suspicion and hostility. According to the investigative records from the Department of Public Safety in American Samoa, Thomas Cruz was consumed by a baseless, irrational jealousy. He had convinced himself, without any foundation in reality, that his wife was engaging in an extramarital affair. This unfounded belief became an obsession. It did not matter that Fiapai continuously and vehemently denied the accusations. In the mind of someone consumed by blind jealousy, logic and truth are often the first casualties. The denial of the accused partner is frequently misinterpreted as further proof of deception. This toxic dynamic creates a closed loop of paranoia and aggression, trapping the victim in a relentless cycle of interrogations and emotional turmoil. To fully comprehend the backdrop of this tragedy, we must examine the broader societal context in which it occurred. The tragic fate of Fiapai Cruz did not happen in a vacuum. It was, in many ways, a horrific manifestation of a systemic issue that plagues many island nations in the Pacific region. Domestic violence and gender-based violence are deeply rooted problems, often exacerbated by cultural practices and outdated ideologies that continue to persist in modern times. In some of these communities, the archaic mindset of male superiority continues to cast a long, oppressive shadow over the lives of women. This patriarchal framework can inadvertently create a culture of silence. Victims of domestic abuse often feel trapped, not just by their abusers, but by the societal expectations that pressure them to keep family matters private. The shame associated with a failed marriage or the fear of being ostracized by the community forces many women to endure unspeakable hardships behind closed doors. They suffer in silence, hoping that the situation will improve, or simply enduring the pain for the sake of keeping the family unit intact for their children. In the village of Niueuli, like many other places, the line between private family business and public safety is often blurred. Neighbors might hear raised voices, notice bruises, or sense the tension emanating from a household, but the unwritten rules of community life often dictate non-interference. People are hesitant to cross the threshold into someone else's home, rationalizing that it is not their place to intervene in a marital dispute. This collective hesitation, born out of a desire to respect boundaries, inadvertently provides a shield for abusers. It allows violence to escalate unseen and unchecked. The tragedy of Fiapai Cruz serves as a devastating testament to the fatal consequences of this societal silence. As the sun set on June 11, 2019, darkness enveloped the village of Niueuli. The night should have been uneventful, marked only by the familiar sounds of the tropical environment. Inside the Cruz residence, however, a storm was brewing. The children were present in the home, a fact that adds an unimaginable layer of horror to the events that were about to unfold. A home is meant to be a sanctuary, a place of ultimate safety for a child. It is the environment where they should feel shielded from the harsh realities of the outside world. But on this night, their sanctuary was about to be violated in the most traumatic way possible. The evening began with a bitter, heated argument. The spark was once again Thomas Cruz's blinding, baseless jealousy. He confronted Fiapai, throwing accusations of infidelity at her. Despite her continuous denials, Thomas's rage was unquenchable. The verbal altercation quickly escalated, the volume of their voices rising, shattering the quiet of the night. The tension in the air was palpable, heavy with the threat of impending violence. For Fiapai, the situation was becoming increasingly perilous. She was trapped in her own home, facing a man who had lost all sense of reason, a man whose perception of reality had been entirely warped by his own unfounded suspicions. What followed was an explosion of horrific, unbridled brutality. When the conflict reached its absolute breaking point, Thomas Cruz crossed a line from which there would be no return. He launched a savage, merciless physical attack on his wife. The sheer brutality of the assault was staggering. He did not use a conventional weapon. Instead, he used his hands, his feet, and everyday household items to inflict maximum damage. The blows were directed forcefully and repeatedly at her head and face. The violence was not a momentary lapse of control. It was a sustained, vicious beating designed to cause profound physical harm. Perhaps the most heart-wrenching and agonizing detail of this entire ordeal is that this savage attack occurred right in front of their 3 young children. The psychological trauma inflicted upon those children in those moments is impossible to quantify. They were forced to watch, helpless and terrified, as their father systematically destroyed their mother. The sounds of the assault, the cries for help, the visceral reality of violence happening mere feet away from them, these are the kinds of scars that do not heal. The innocence of 3 children was violently stolen that night, replaced by a permanent, haunting memory of terror. The violence within the house was so extreme, and the screams so piercing, that the walls of the residence could no longer contain the horror. The sounds of agony and the frantic crying spilled out into the quiet village air. It was loud enough and desperate enough to finally break through the heavy barrier of the community's usual reluctance to interfere. Neighbors, realizing that this was not a simple domestic dispute but a life-threatening emergency, sprang into action. The unmistakable sounds of a brutal beating prompted them to intervene, leading to urgent calls to the police. But by the time the authorities from the Department of Public Safety were dispatched and arrived at the scene, the damage had been done. The quiet streets of Newell were suddenly illuminated by the flashing lights of police cruisers and emergency medical vehicles. Law enforcement officers cautiously approached the residence, not knowing exactly what level of danger awaited them inside. When they breached the threshold and entered the home, they were met with a scene of utter devastation. Thomas Cruz was nowhere to be found. Realizing the magnitude of what he had done, the 36-year-old husband and father had chosen the path of cowardice. He had fled the scene, vanishing into the night, abandoning his critically injured wife and his severely traumatized children. He left behind a shattered family and a crime scene that would haunt the responding officers for years to come. Lying on the floor, in a rapidly expanding pool of her own blood, was Fiapo Cruz. She was completely unresponsive. The physical toll of the beating was immediately and gruesomely apparent to the first responders. Her face and head had borne the brunt of the savage attack, leaving her unrecognizable and clinging to life by the thinnest of threads. The immediate priority shifted from law enforcement to desperate, urgent medical intervention. Paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her, recognizing the critical nature of her traumatic brain injuries. Every second counted as they carefully loaded her battered body into the ambulance, beginning a desperate race against time to the LBJ Tropical Medical Center. As the ambulance sped away, sirens wailing into the dark Pacific night, the village of Newell was left in a state of shock and disbelief. The reality of the violence had pierced the veil of their peaceful community. The home, now a secured crime scene, stood as a silent, grim monument to the horrific events that had just transpired. Inside, 3 children were left without their mother, their lives irreparably altered, facing a future shadowed by profound loss and trauma. The hunt for Thomas Cruz was about to begin, but the immediate focus, the hopes and prayers of a community, followed the ambulance carrying a 31-year-old mother who was fighting a losing battle against death. This marked the harrowing beginning of a case that would not only demand justice, but would also force American Samoa to hold a mirror up to its own societal conscience, sparking a desperate cry for change that could no longer be ignored. The echoes of Fiapo's screams that night would become the catalyst for a much larger movement, but in those chaotic, desperate hours, there was only the blood, the flight of a guilty man, and a mother fading into the darkness. The fluorescent lights of the LBJ Tropical Medical Center burned with an unforgiving intensity as the ambulance carrying Fiapo Cruz arrived at the emergency bay. In the heart of American Samoa, this hospital is the primary facility equipped to handle severe medical crises, but the trauma team waiting on standby was about to face a scene that would test the limits of their emotional and professional endurance. The transition from the chaotic, blood-stained floor of her Newell home to the sterile, hyper-organized environment of the trauma resuscitation room was jarring. Medical professionals moved with practiced, urgent precision as they quickly assessed the catastrophic damage inflicted upon the 31-year-old mother. The initial evaluation painted a remarkably grim picture. Fiapo had sustained a severe traumatic brain injury. The repeated, forceful blows to her head had caused massive internal bleeding, leading to a profound cerebral hemorrhage. The skull, designed by nature to protect the delicate tissues of the brain, had been fatally compromised by the sheer brute force of the assault. Inside, The swelling was relentless, creating an unbearable pressure against her brain stem. Alongside the internal devastation, the external injuries were a horrifying testament to the savagery of the attack. She suffered from extensive, deep bruising across her entire body, and multiple severe fractures radiated across her delicate facial bones, entirely obscuring her identity and illustrating the unrestrained rage of her attacker. Neurological assessments were conducted immediately to determine her baseline level of consciousness. The doctors utilized the Glasgow Coma Scale, a standard clinical tool designed to objectively measure a patient's neurological functioning following head trauma. The results were absolutely devastating. Fiapai registered at a stage 3 deep coma. In medical terminology, this indicates complete and profound unresponsiveness. She exhibited no eye opening, no verbal output, and no motor response to any external stimuli, including deep pain tests. She was trapped in an impenetrable darkness, her body failing rapidly under the immense weight of the trauma. Recognizing the imminent failure of her respiratory system, the medical team had no choice but to intubate her. A tube was carefully inserted into her compromised airway, connecting her to a mechanical ventilator. This machine would forcefully push oxygen into her lungs and draw carbon dioxide out, artificially sustaining the most basic physiological rhythm of life. Her survival was now entirely dependent on a complex array of medical technology, digital monitors, and intravenous drips pumping vital stabilizing medications directly into her bloodstream. While the intensive care unit at the LBJ Tropical Medical Center became the epicenter of a desperate medical battle, a completely different kind of intensity was unfolding across the island. The Department of Public Safety had launched a full-scale territorial manhunt for Thomas Cruz. The 36-year-old husband had vanished into the humid Pacific night immediately following his violent outburst. American Samoa is a geographically confined territory characterized by steep volcanic mountains and dense tropical vegetation. While the island is relatively small, the rugged terrain provides ample temporary hiding places for a desperate fugitive attempting to evade the consequences of his actions. However, the deeply tight-knit nature of the community meant that long-term anonymity was practically impossible. The police mobilized their resources quickly, coordinating search efforts and utilizing intelligence gathered from shocked neighbors and local informants. By the morning of June 12th, just hours after the brutal assault had shattered the peace of the village, the authorities secured a formal arrest warrant from the judicial magistrate. The execution of the warrant was swift and decisive. Thomas Cruz was located, apprehended by law enforcement officers, and immediately placed into police custody. The transition from an enraged, violent aggressor in his own home to a detained suspect in handcuffs was abrupt. He was transported to the Central Processing Facility, where he underwent the standard booking procedures. He was fingerprinted, photographed for his mugshot, and placed in a secure holding cell. The initial charging documents filed by the prosecuting attorneys reflected the immediate, complex reality of the situation at that specific moment in time. Because Fiapai was still technically alive, although sustained entirely by artificial life support machines, the criminal charges could not yet reflect a completed homicide. Therefore, Thomas Cruz was officially charged with first-degree assault and the intentional infliction of severe bodily injury. These are incredibly serious felony offenses within the American Samoan Penal Code, carrying severe custodial sentences that reflect the gravity of the physical harm caused. Following his arrest and processing, a mandatory bail hearing was convened in the High Court. In the judicial system, bail is generally considered a foundational right, designed to allow a presumed innocent individual to remain free pending trial, provided they can offer financial assurance of their return to face the charges. However, magistrates possess the absolute legal authority to deny bail under specific, extreme circumstances where the defendant poses a clear danger to the community or a flight risk. During this critical hearing, the prosecuting attorney presented a compelling and undeniable argument against releasing Thomas Cruz back into the community. They detailed the sheer, unadulterated savagery of the beating inflicted upon his helpless wife. They emphasized the particularly horrific fact that this extreme violence occurred in the direct presence of their 3 young, vulnerable children, highlighting a severe level of depravity. Furthermore, they pointed to his immediate flight from the blood-soaked crime scene as definitive proof that he posed an extreme flight risk. The presiding judge, presented with the overwhelming preliminary evidence of brutality and the clear risk of evasion, firmly and unequivocally denied any possibility of bail. Thomas Cruz was remanded to the Territorial Correctional Facility, his physical freedom stripped away as he sat in a concrete cell, awaiting the agonizing resolution of his wife's critical medical condition. Back in the hushed, deeply somber environment of the intensive care unit, time seemed to stand completely still for everyone involved. For 4 agonizing days, the family of Fiapai Cruz maintained a continuous, heartbreaking vigil by her bedside. The sterile room was dominated by the rhythmic, mechanical hissing of the ventilator and the steady, monotonous beeping of the cardiac monitor. These artificial, synchronized sounds were the only indicators of ongoing life in a room practically suffocated by overwhelming grief and despair. The dedicated medical staff worked tirelessly around the clock, adjusting complex medications, monitoring the dangerously high intracranial pressure, and administering neuroprotective therapies in a desperate, continuous bid to reduce the fatal swelling in her brain. They were fighting an exhausting war against biological inevitability. Despite their most aggressive and advanced medical interventions, the physical damage inflicted by her husband was simply too extensive to overcome. The massive cerebral hemorrhage had caused an irreversible cascade of cellular death deep within the vital brain tissue. The family watched helplessly, suspended in a state of excruciating emotional limbo, constantly oscillating between desperate, clinging hope and the crushing, terrifying weight of impending reality. They spoke softly to her, prayed fervently over her motionless body, and held her cold, lifeless hands, clinging to the rapidly fading possibility of a medical miracle. But the digital monitors lining the walls told a distinctly different, deeply tragic story. The electrical activity in her brain was steadily diminishing, fading inexorably into a flat, unresponsive line on the electroencephalogram. The uncontrollable swelling had ultimately compromised the brainstem, the ancient, foundational part of the human brain responsible for regulating autonomic, life-sustaining functions like spontaneous breathing and the natural regulation of the heart rate. Without a functioning brain stem, the human body cannot survive independently, regardless of the strength of the heart. On the morning of June 15th, the medical team faced the most difficult and profoundly sad task required of their profession. Following a series of rigorous, legally mandated neurological examinations spaced out over hours, the attending physicians reached a definitive and inescapable conclusion. There was absolutely no blood flow reaching the brain tissue, and no electrical activity whatsoever could be detected by the most sensitive instruments. Fiapai Cruz had suffered complete, irreversible brain death. In the eyes of both advanced medical science and the strict definitions of the law, she had definitively passed away, even though her heart was still being forced to beat by intravenous medications and the mechanical ventilator was still artificially expanding and contracting her chest. The senior doctors gathered the exhausted, completely devastated family members in a private, quiet consultation room to deliver the final, crushing blow. They explained the complex medical concept of brain death clearly and with deep compassion, confirming the tragic reality that the vibrant, loving mother of 3 was truly gone, and that the impressive array of machinery in the adjacent room was merely preserving a hollow physical shell. Faced with this unbearable reality, the grieving family was forced to make an incredibly agonizing decision. They had to give their formal, written consent to the hospital staff to withdraw all life-sustaining medical equipment. It is a deeply traumatic decision that goes against every natural human instinct, requiring family members to actively participate in the final, physical cessation of a beloved family member's existence. But out of deep, profound love and ultimate respect for Fiapai, and knowing she would never return to them, they agreed to let her physical body go peacefully. In a quiet, profoundly solemn moment surrounded by weeping loved ones, the medical staff gently disconnected the mechanical ventilator. The rhythmic, artificial breathing stopped instantly. The digital monitors were quietly silenced and turned away. Within mere moments, her heart, no longer artificially supported by the steady influx of synthetic medications, slowly beat for the final time and then fell completely still. On June 15, 2019, Fiapai Cruz was officially pronounced dead by the attending physician. The agonizing 4-day medical battle had concluded, leaving behind a profound, irreplaceable void in her family and an overwhelming sense of profound injustice that began to ripple outward through the entire island community. The tragic death of Fiapai Cruz immediately triggered a massive, seismic shift in the ongoing legal proceedings against her husband. The situation was no longer categorized as an aggravated assault case. It had escalated into a full criminal homicide investigation. The prosecutors working at the Attorney General's office moved with rapid, decisive legal action to ensure the official court documents accurately reflected the newly established, tragic reality of the situation. They meticulously reviewed the medical examiner's preliminary death reports, the detailed police documentation and photographs of the brutal crime scene, and the chronological timeline of the violent attack. The collected evidence clearly and undeniably demonstrated that the severe injuries leading directly to her untimely death were inflicted intentionally, brutally, and with extreme malice aforethought. There was absolutely no medical or legal ambiguity regarding the true cause of her death or the specific identity of the perpetrator responsible for it. On June 17th, just 2 agonizing days after she drew her final, artificially assisted breath, the legal mechanism of American Samoa delivered its severe response. The prosecuting attorneys officially filed an amended criminal complaint with the Territorial High Court. The previous, lesser charges of severe assault were entirely superseded by the most severe criminal accusation available within the territory's judicial system. Thomas Cruz was officially and formally indicted on the catastrophic charge of first-degree murder. This newly elevated charge carried an entirely different magnitude of legal jeopardy and societal condemnation. In the territory of American Samoa, a legal conviction for murder in the first degree represents the ultimate, unforgivable violation of the community's social contract. It is a charge strictly reserved for the most heinous, coldly premeditated, or exceptionally brutal killings that shock the conscience of the public. The legal ramifications for Thomas Cruz were now absolute, terrifying, and completely devastating. By facing a formal first-degree murder indictment, he was looking directly at the harshest punitive penalties permitted by territorial law. Depending on the specific aggravating factors formally presented by the prosecution during a potential future criminal trial, a guilty conviction could result in a mandatory judicial sentence of life imprisonment without any possibility of parole, meaning he would be condemned to spend the entirety of his natural life behind the bleak concrete walls of the Territorial Correctional Facility, completely isolated from society. Furthermore, under certain extreme, specific legal circumstances, the criminal statutes of American Samoa even allow for the consideration of the ultimate penalty. The stark, inescapable reality of his dire situation finally crystallized inside the cold isolation of his jail cell. The blind, irrational, and deeply toxic jealousy that had fueled his violent, uncontrollable rampage had not only extinguished the precious life of his wife and irreparably destroyed the future of his 3 innocent children, but it had also firmly guaranteed the complete, permanent eradication of his own personal freedom. The swift elevation of the criminal charges brought a grim, necessary sense of procedural justice to the high-profile case, but it offered absolutely no emotional solace to the grieving, shattered family or the deeply unsettled, grieving community of New Orleans. The transition of the narrative from the sterile hospital room to the formal, imposing courtroom marked the difficult beginning of a long, incredibly arduous legal journey towards accountability. The focus of the territory now shifted entirely to building an impenetrable, airtight criminal case against the perpetrator, ensuring beyond any reasonable doubt that the legal system would hold him entirely, completely accountable for the unimaginable destruction he had so violently wrought upon his own family. Law enforcement investigators meticulously cataloged every single piece of forensic evidence, from the horrifying blood spatter patterns documented on the walls of the family home to the heartbreaking, traumatized testimonies of the initial first responders who witnessed the immediate, bloody aftermath of the violence. The heavy machinery of justice was now fully engaged, driven by a solemn, unwavering obligation to speak loudly and clearly for a victim who had been permanently, violently silenced by the very person who had once vowed to protect her. The legal process following the death of Fiapai Cruz was not merely a series of bureaucratic steps. It was a complex, high-stakes navigation through the territorial judicial system of American Samoa, aimed at ensuring that the horrific violence perpetrated within the Niueule household was met with the full weight of the law. As the formal indictment of first-degree murder was finalized and presented before the High Court, the atmosphere inside the courtroom shifted from one of preliminary procedural caution to the somber gravity of a major criminal trial. Thomas Cruz, once the man of the house, now appeared before the magistrate as a defendant facing the most severe consequences possible under the Penal Code. The judicial proceedings were characterized by a meticulous, almost clinical approach to the evidence, designed to strip away any potential defense claims of passion or lack of intent. The prosecution's primary objective was to demonstrate, with absolute forensic clarity, that the death of Fiapai was not an accidental byproduct of a domestic dispute, but rather the intended outcome of a calculated, sustained, and brutal assault. During the pretrial hearings, the defense attempted to navigate the narrow pathways of mitigation, perhaps hinting at the overwhelming emotional pressure or the spontaneous nature of the argument that preceded the violence. However, the evidentiary record built by the Department of Public Safety stood as an insurmountable barrier to such defenses. The police reports, which included detailed descriptions of the scene and testimonies from responding officers, painted a picture of unbridled aggression. The evidence suggested that the intensity of the physical trauma, the severe, multiple fractures to the facial bones, and the profound, irreversible damage to the brain could only have been caused by an attacker who had moved far beyond a state of momentary loss of control. The sheer, systematic nature of the blows indicated a level of cruelty that resonated deeply with the court. The prosecution leaned heavily into this aspect, presenting the violence as a choice made by the defendant rather than a fleeting instinct. They emphasized that in a home filled with 3 young, vulnerable children, the act of inflicting such life-ending injuries upon their mother was an act of supreme depravity that negated any claims of an unintentional outcome. The courtroom dynamics were often fraught with tension, as the reality of the crime began to fully materialize through the testimony of those who first encountered the scene. Officers who entered the Niueule residence on that fateful night were called to recount the harrowing details of what they discovered. They spoke of the initial silence that greeted them, followed by the sight of Fiapai lying in a pool of blood, her physical state already indicating that she was struggling for every breath. These officers, trained to maintain professional composure, struggled to hide the visible impact that this scene had on their own well-being. Their testimony was vital, as it provided the court with a visceral, ground-level understanding of the aftermath. Each officer's account corroborated the others, creating a cohesive narrative that destroyed any attempt by the defense to minimize the defendant's role. The physical evidence, including the items used as improvised weapons during the assault, served as a grim reminder of the reality behind the courtroom arguments. Perhaps the most significant challenge in the legal process was addressing the role of the 3 children who were present at the time of the attack. Their trauma was a ghost that haunted the entire trial. While the legal system in American Samoa sought to protect these children from the further harm of having to recount the events in a public setting, their presence in the home remained a cornerstone of the prosecution's case against the motive and the nature of the crime. The psychological impact on the children was noted in the pre-sentencing reports, which detailed the profound loss of their mother and the devastating realization of their father's culpability. This context served to harden the court's resolve, as it reinforced the idea that the crime was not just an attack on an individual, but a total destruction of a family unit. The court, cognizant of these broader human costs, ensured that the proceedings remained focused on the accountability of the defendant, despite the attempts by the legal counsel to shift focus toward more abstract concepts of marital conflict or psychological instability. The prosecution's narrative was further bolstered by the timeline of events that the Department of Public Safety reconstructed. The evidence showed a clear progression from the initial, unfounded accusations of infidelity that Thomas directed at his wife, to the escalation of the argument and, finally, to the eruption of physical violence. By mapping this timeline, the prosecutors demonstrated that Thomas had ample opportunity to de-escalate the conflict, to leave the room, or to seek help. Instead, the evidence suggested that he systematically chose to engage in increasingly dangerous behaviors, culminating in a lethal attack. The flight from the scene was presented not as an act of panic, but as a recognition of the crime committed, further cementing the case for intent. The argument of the prosecution was simple but devastating. The defendant knew exactly what he was doing. He chose to carry out the act to its completion, and he then attempted to evade the consequences of his actions. Throughout the months of legal maneuvering, the courtroom became a place where the cultural and social tensions of American Samoa were quietly reflected. The case of the Niuale tragedy was never just a trial of one man. It was a trial of the silence that often surrounds domestic violence in the region. The public interest in the case was immense, with local community leaders and women's advocacy groups closely monitoring the trial, hoping that the court's verdict would set a precedent that violence against women would not be tolerated in any capacity. The pressure on the judicial system to deliver a verdict that truly represented justice was palpable. It was a test of the court's ability to uphold the law in a way that resonated with the values of a changing society, one that was becoming increasingly intolerant of the old, oppressive norms that had allowed such violence to fester in the shadows for too long. As the trial neared its conclusion, the legal arguments solidified around the question of the severity of the sentence. The prosecution argued that, given the brutality of the act, the presence of the children, and the complete lack of remorse displayed by the defendant following his apprehension, nothing less than the maximum possible sentence would suffice. They argued that a lenient sentence would undermine the gravity of the crime and fail to provide the family of the victim with any semblance of closure. The defense, on the other hand, sought to present Thomas as a man driven to the edge by his own internal demons, hoping to elicit a measure of mercy from the judge. They spoke of the potential for rehabilitation and the tragic nature of the life he had destroyed, but these arguments found little purchase in the face of the overwhelming evidence of the brutality he had inflicted on his wife. The judge, in deliberating, had to balance the legal requirements of sentencing with a profound societal need for justice. The final verdict, when it came, was the culmination of everything that had been fought for during those long, difficult months. It was a moment of profound significance, not just for the family of Fiapai Cruz, but for the entire territory. The court's decision was firm and unequivocal, reflecting a deep, uncompromising adherence to the principles of justice. The defendant, found guilty of first-degree murder, was sentenced to the maximum extent of the law, a sentence designed to ensure that he would remain removed from the community he had so cruelly damaged. The declaration of the sentence was met with a somber, respectful silence in the courtroom, a recognition that while justice had been served, the loss of Fiapai remained an irreparable tragedy. The closing of the case marked the end of the legal battle, but it was merely the beginning of the long, painful process of healing for those who remained. The story of Fiapai Cruz, now a matter of public record, serves as a permanent, chilling reminder of the fragility of life and the catastrophic cost of unbridled, irrational violence in the home. The courtroom doors eventually closed on the trial of Thomas Cruz, but the echoes of the case continued to reverberate through the villages of American Samoa long after the gavel had been struck for the final time. The investigators, who had meticulously pieced together the narrative of that night in Niuale, returned to their duties, but they carried with them the memory of the evidence they had processed and the life that had been so abruptly silenced. For the prosecutors, the victory in court was hollowed by the knowledge that no sentence could ever restore the life of the mother or mend the broken spirits of her children. The legal system had fulfilled its duty, but the community recognized that the true work of justice, the work of preventing such a tragedy from ever happening again, was only just beginning. The case became a catalyst for a broader, more necessary conversation about the state of domestic violence, the role of community intervention, and the legal frameworks that define safety for the most vulnerable members of society. The tragedy, in its most painful and enduring sense, became the foundation for a collective demand for a safer, more transparent, and more accountable future. As the details of the crime and the resulting judicial outcome were disseminated throughout the islands, the public response was a mix of intense grief and a powerful, unified call for change, ensuring that the legacy of Fiapo Cruz would be one that, in time, might prevent another life from being stolen in the same devastating way. The aftermath of the trial and the finality of the judicial sentence did not serve as a period at the end of a sentence, but rather as a somber opening to a much broader societal introspection across American Samoa. When the gavel fell, sealing the fate of Thomas Cruz, the legal chapter of the tragedy concluded, yet the human story, one characterized by a profound, echoing void, began to reshape the collective consciousness of the islands. For a territory deeply anchored in tradition and the sanctity of the family unit, the murder of Fiapo Cruz was a violent intrusion that could no longer be dismissed as a private, regrettable occurrence. It forced a conversation that was long overdue, one that moved beyond the confines of the courtroom and into the homes, the churches, and the legislative halls of Tutuila and beyond. The sheer brutality of the act, committed in the sanctuary of a family home and in the presence of defenseless children, acted as an undeniable catalyst, shattering the traditional veneer of silence that had historically enveloped instances of domestic strife. In the months following the conclusion of the legal proceedings, the village of Niuali and the broader community began to grapple with the realization that their silence had been, in its own way, an accomplice. The normalization of the patriarchal structure, which often placed the man as the final, unquestioned authority within the home, had left many women feeling isolated, their autonomy subordinated to the whims of an abusive partner. The tragedy highlighted the dangerous intersection of cultural expectations and the lack of accessible, safe support systems for victims of abuse. Advocacy groups, which had previously operated on the periphery of public discourse, found themselves at the forefront of a shifting movement. The Alliance Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, along with various local nonprofit organizations, seized this moment of heightened awareness to push for legislative reform and the expansion of community-based protection services. They argued with renewed urgency that the protection of human life must supersede the cultural desire to keep domestic disputes behind closed doors. The impact on the three children, now orphans of a tragedy they were forced to witness, became the most piercing emotional focal point of the public's grief. Their existence served as a constant, heartbreaking reminder of the long-term, intergenerational trauma caused by domestic violence. The Department of Social Services, working in tandem with the extended family and community members, faced the gargantuan task of providing stability for these children in a world that had been fundamentally dismantled. The narrative of their survival, and the efforts to protect them from the compounding effects of their loss, became an integral part of the community's commitment to change. There was a growing recognition that true justice for Fiapo would not be found solely in the sentencing of her husband, but in the successful restoration and protection of the lives she had left behind. This collective responsibility turned the children's plight into a symbol of the territory's duty to its most vulnerable citizens. The legislative response in the territory began to reflect this heightened urgency. Lawmakers, pressured by a public that was no longer willing to look away from the realities of gender-based violence, initiated reviews of existing statutes to ensure that victims had stronger legal avenues to seek protection before violence escalated to lethal levels. The discussions surrounding these reforms were intense and often difficult, as they required the society to confront the uncomfortable intersection of traditional practices and modern legal standards of human rights. Nevertheless, the momentum for change was undeniable. New initiatives were launched to improve the reporting of domestic incidents, ensuring that law enforcement was better trained to recognize the early warning signs of abuse. By treating domestic violence as a critical public health and safety issue rather than a private marital dispute, the territory began to build a more robust framework of intervention, one that prioritized the safety of women and children above the maintenance of outdated social hierarchies. Educational campaigns began to circulate throughout the islands, emphasizing the importance of consent, the necessity of healthy communication, and the absolute unacceptability of violence in any relationship. These programs were directed not only at the youth, tasked with unlearning the toxic patterns of the past, but also at adults, encouraging a shift in perspective regarding the roles of men and women in a contemporary family. The churches, which hold significant influence in the social and cultural fabric of American Samoa, also became key participants in this dialogue. Religious leaders began to use their pulpits to address the issue of domestic violence directly, reinforcing the message that abuse is fundamentally at odds with the values of love, respect, and stewardship that define their faith. This shift in discourse from the religious establishment was particularly significant, as it provided a powerful counter-narrative to the idea that male authority granted the right to subjugate or harm others. The legacy of the Newali tragedy is, therefore, a complicated one. It is a story of immense loss, a life taken in the most horrifying of ways, and a family left in the wake of an inexplicable betrayal. Yet, it is also a story of a community that, when faced with the absolute horror of its own hidden realities, chose to stand up and demand a different future. The sorrow that gripped the islands in June 2019 has transformed into a persistent, vigilant effort to protect those who are vulnerable. The memory of Fiapai Cruz, while rooted in the agony of her final moments, is now inextricably linked to the movement that she unintentionally ignited. She is no longer just a victim of a crime. She has become a beacon of the need for persistent, systematic, and cultural change. The changes occurring in American Samoa are by no means complete, nor are they a panacea for the complex issue of domestic violence, but they represent a definitive step away from a past of silence and toward a future where the home is truly a sanctuary for everyone within it. Reflecting on the life of Fiapai, one is struck by the ordinary nature of her existence: a mother, a partner, a member of a community, and the extraordinary tragedy that befell her. Her story is a stark, unavoidable reminder of the volatility of human emotion when left untethered from empathy and reason. It challenges the witness to look closer at their own environments, to listen more carefully to the sounds of distress, and to recognize that the protection of the innocent is a communal duty that transcends the boundaries of the home. The trial, the verdict, and the subsequent shift in societal priorities are the outward manifestations of a community's attempt to process an event that defied their sense of order and decency. As the years pass, the specific details of the crime may fade into the archives of the territory's history, but the impact of that summer in 2019 will continue to shape the social and legal landscape of the islands for generations to come. The goal, as envisioned by those who now work to prevent such occurrences, is a society where the memory of Fiapai Cruz is remembered not just as a tragedy, but as the turning point that paved the way for a safer, more compassionate, and truly equitable existence for the people of American Samoa. This ongoing transformation is a testament to the resilience of the community and its commitment to honoring the life of a woman whose voice was stolen. The efforts to institutionalize protection, to educate the next generation, and to foster a culture of openness regarding mental health and conflict resolution are the building blocks of this new, evolving societal consciousness. While the pain of the loss remains, it is being channeled into a purposeful advocacy that refuses to let the lessons of the Newali case be forgotten. Every child who is shielded from harm, every victim who finds the courage to seek help, and every community member who decides to speak out instead of remaining silent is a part of that legacy. The tragedy at Newali has irrevocably altered the path of the territory, serving as a dark, necessary reminder that justice is not just a destination to be reached in a courtroom, but an active, daily practice of care, protection, and uncompromising respect for the dignity of every individual. As we conclude this examination of the case, it is the resilience, the shift in discourse, and the enduring memory of a mother's life that remain the most significant takeaways, illustrating the profound and lasting weight of one life and the collective power of a community that has decided, with absolute resolve, that it will never again allow such a loss to happen in silence. The final legal resolution of the case against Thomas Cruz marked the end of the judicial process, but the courtroom proceedings themselves served as a harrowing dissection of human cruelty and the catastrophic failure of the marital bond. As the trial unfolded, The prosecution meticulously built a narrative that not only highlighted the brutality of the act, but also dismantled the defendant's attempts to frame his actions as the result of a temporary, uncontrollable emotional surge. Every witness testimony, every forensic photograph, and every piece of physical evidence was curated to strip away any veneer of ambiguity, leaving the jury and the public with an undeniable picture of intent. The defense's efforts to portray Thomas as a man driven to the edge by his own inner turmoil, his baseless, all-consuming jealousy regarding his wife's fidelity, were systematically dismantled by the prosecution, who highlighted that while jealousy is a powerful human emotion, it does not absolve an individual of the responsibility to act with restraint and humanity. The courtroom was filled with an oppressive, heavy silence each time the details of the attack were recounted, a silence that reflected the collective horror of the community witnessing the destruction of a life that had once been filled with promise. The judge's final sentencing was a moment of profound gravity that echoed through the halls of justice in American Samoa. In delivering the maximum penalty, the court sent an unequivocal message. The safety of the individual, particularly within the home, is a foundational right that the law will defend with the utmost severity. By rejecting the possibility of a reduced sentence or any mitigation, the court acknowledged the systematic nature of the violence inflicted upon Fiapai Cruz. The judge's remarks during the sentencing highlighted that the presence of the couple's 3 young children during the attack was an aggravating factor of the highest order, transforming the crime from a domestic dispute into a predatory act that scarred the lives of the innocent forever. The courtroom, upon hearing the finality of the sentence, became a space where the weight of the tragedy was fully acknowledged. There was no sense of triumph, even in the achievement of justice, as the reality of the irreparable loss remained the primary focus of everyone present. The verdict was a declaration that the society would no longer turn a blind eye to the reality of domestic violence, and that the perpetrators of such acts would face the full force of the law's condemnation. The process of the trial was also a testament to the dedication of the investigators from the Department of Public Safety. Their work in the months leading up to the sentencing was characterized by an exhaustive commitment to the truth, ensuring that no stone was left unturned in documenting the sequence of events that led to the fatal night. From the initial crime scene investigation to the forensic analysis of the injuries and the interview process with neighbors, the law enforcement team provided the foundation upon which the case for first-degree murder was built. Their testimony during the trial not only provided the necessary evidence for a conviction, but also offered a glimpse into the emotional toll that such cases take on those tasked with upholding the law. The investigators spoke with a sense of solemn duty, fully aware that they were not just solving a crime, but standing as the final, official voice for a victim who had been silenced by the most brutal of means. Their efforts, combined with the presentation of the legal team, ensured that the narrative of the case was controlled by the facts of the evidence, leaving no room for the defendant to manipulate the perception of his actions. Throughout the duration of the legal proceedings, the family of Fiapai Cruz remained a central, albeit grieving, presence. Their endurance through the agonizing timeline of the trial was a reflection of their commitment to seeing justice served for their loved one. The courtroom environment, while designed to be a place of neutral inquiry, often felt like an arena where the family was forced to confront the most painful aspects of their loss repeatedly. Yet, their presence was essential, as it kept the human element of the case at the forefront of the proceedings. Their emotional testimony, delivered with dignity and profound sadness, provided the context that the sterile legal documents could not capture. It served as a reminder that behind every criminal statute and every courtroom debate, there was a real life that had been extinguished and a real family that would carry the weight of that loss for the rest of their lives. The legal system, in its function of providing justice, also played the role of a witness to the family's pain, and the resolution of the case, while failing to bring back the deceased, was a necessary step in the long and difficult journey of grieving and processing. The final verdict, as the culmination of the legal process, underscored a fundamental shift in how domestic violence cases would be handled in the future. It signaled that the era of treating such incidents as private family matters had passed, and that the state would intervene with the full power of its judicial authority to prevent further tragedy. The case of Thomas Cruz became a precedent, a reference point for future prosecutors and judges who would be faced with similar acts of domestic aggression. The outcome of the trial provided a clear, uncompromising framework for how such crimes should be treated as serious, punishable offenses that demand a rigorous and transparent judicial response. This shift in perspective is perhaps the most significant outcome of the trial, as it lays the groundwork for a future where victims of abuse can feel more confident that the legal system will act as a shield rather than a bystander. Reflecting on the courtroom phase of this tragedy, one cannot help but be struck by the sheer, unalterable finality of the result. The legal system, in its cold and calculated approach, provided the structure required to address the crime, but the internal, emotional resolution for those affected is a far more protracted process. The trial was not merely a series of arguments and evidence. It was a societal event that forced the population of American Samoa to confront the reality that violence, no matter the context, is an affront to the humanity of every member of the community. The courtroom, in this sense, became a mirror reflecting both the darkness of the act and the collective desire to move toward a more enlightened and protective society. As the case moved into history, it left behind a profound understanding that justice is not just a destination to be reached, but a necessary, continuous process of vigilance and advocacy. The case of the Newell domestic violence incident stands as a chilling, necessary lesson on the fragility of life and the unyielding necessity for the law to act as a protector against the darkest impulses of the individual. As we look back at the conclusion of the trial, the image that remains is not one of a courtroom battle won or lost, but of the ongoing, heavy work of healing that continues long after the legal files have been archived. The justice achieved was for the victim and for the sake of a society that could no longer tolerate the shadow of such violence. The final sentence served to remove the perpetrator from the reach of the vulnerable, but it also served as a permanent marker, a point of no return for the community's engagement with the reality of domestic abuse. The legal system had fulfilled its function, acting with the weight and gravity that the circumstances demanded, and in doing so, it provided the essential closure that the family of Fiapai needed to move toward their own private paths of recovery. The memory of the trial will fade, as all legal proceedings eventually do, but the impact of the final verdict, the affirmation that a life taken so brutally will be met with the maximum severity of the law, will remain a cornerstone of the territory's judicial identity for the foreseeable future, ensuring that the legacy of Fiapai Cruz, while born of tragedy, serves as a beacon of accountability. The tragedy that unfolded in the village of Newell in June 2019 serves as a haunting and indelible scar on the collective memory of American Samoa, a narrative that has transcended the confines of a local news report to become a defining moment in the territory's social evolution. When we reflect upon the life of Fiapai Cruz, we are not merely recounting the sequence of a horrific crime. We are engaging in a necessary, somber reflection on the vulnerability of the human condition and the profound, rippling impact of domestic violence. Her death, a result of unbridled, irrational rage, forced an entire community to peer into the dark, hidden recesses of their domestic lives, ultimately sparking a movement that prioritized transparency, accountability, and the protection of the vulnerable over the comfort of traditional silence. The legacy of this case is not defined by the violence of the assailant, but by the resilience of a society that, having witnessed the absolute destruction of a young mother's life, chose to embark on a difficult, transformative journey toward a future where such a tragedy might be prevented. In the wake of the legal proceedings, the emotional and psychological fallout remains the most significant and long-lasting aspect of the narrative. The three children, who were forced to bear witness to the irreversible destruction of their world, represent the deepest tragedy of the incident. Their journey toward healing, supported by the dedicated efforts of social services and a supportive, extended family network, has become a symbol of the territory's responsibility to protect those whose lives have been shattered by domestic brutality. Their existence is a constant, poignant reminder that the cost of violence is not just the loss of a life, but the fracturing of future generations. The community's commitment to providing them with a semblance of safety and normalcy is perhaps the most noble aspect of the post-tragedy environment. It illustrates that while the law may focus on retribution and justice, the true resolution of such a catastrophe is found in the collective effort to nurture those left in the wake of the storm. The societal shifts initiated by this case are profound and continue to permeate the islands. The advocacy organizations that rose to prominence following the Newell tragedy have effectively challenged the entrenched norms that previously allowed domestic abuse to persist in the shadows. By fostering an environment where victims are encouraged to come forward, where resources for intervention are made more accessible, and where the conversation around healthy relationship dynamics is normalized, these groups have fundamentally altered the landscape of social safety. The integration of domestic violence prevention into educational programs and church teachings signifies a holistic approach to the problem, acknowledging that change must occur at both the structural and the interpersonal levels. This movement represents a turning point in the cultural history of American Samoa, demonstrating a newfound resolve to address the roots of violence rather than merely reacting to its symptoms. Reflecting on the timeline of the incident, from the initial, unfounded accusations of infidelity to the final, fatal act and the subsequent legal resolution, one is struck by the chilling predictability of the escalation. It underscores the critical importance of early intervention, the need for law enforcement to be equipped with the tools to recognize and respond to the signs of domestic terror before they reach a lethal threshold. The lesson learned from this case is that silence is the greatest ally of the abuser, and the courage to break that silence is the most potent weapon in the fight against domestic violence. The investigators who meticulously reconstructed the events of that June night have done more than just solve a crime. They have provided a blueprint for future law enforcement responses, ensuring that the lessons of the Newell case serve as a standard for operational excellence and victim-centered justice. As the years pass, the specific, gruesome details of the assault may inevitably fade from the public's immediate awareness, yet the systemic impact remains firmly embedded in the territorial consciousness. The legislative reforms and the public health focus on domestic safety serve as living monuments to the life of Fiapai Cruz. Her memory, while inextricably linked to the horrific injustice of her end, is now a cornerstone of a broader, more compassionate societal identity. The story of her life, and the tragedy that stole it, has served to unify the community in a way that was previously unimaginable, fostering a shared sense of responsibility for the safety and dignity of every citizen. This collective commitment to change is the most profound and enduring legacy of the entire ordeal, ensuring that the voice of the victim is heard long after her physical presence has been lost. Ultimately, the Newell case stands as a testament to the fact that, even in the face of insurmountable sorrow, a community can find the strength to redefine itself. It is a story that demands we look at the people around us with greater awareness and empathy, recognizing that the sanctuary of the home is only as secure as the society that surrounds it. The journey toward a more equitable and protective future for the people of American Samoa is an ongoing process, one that requires constant vigilance, unwavering commitment, and the refusal to accept that violence is an inevitable part of human existence. The tragic, untimely death of Fiapai Cruz has illuminated a path toward a more secure tomorrow, and it is the responsibility of every community member to walk that path with resolve. Her life, though cut short by the actions of an individual fueled by his own darkness, has become a source of light, guiding a territory toward a future where the values of respect, safety, and mutual protection are the foundations upon which every home is built. As we bring this account to a close, it is important to emphasize that the true weight of the Newell tragedy lies not in the finality of the court's decision, but in the enduring spirit of those who refuse to let the lessons of the case be forgotten. The narrative of this incident is a bridge between a past defined by silence and a future shaped by the active, collective demand for safety. It serves as a reminder that the cost of inaction is too great, and that the protection of the innocent is a standard by which the health and morality of a society are ultimately measured. In the end, the legacy of Fiapai Cruz is one of hope, a hope that arises from the ashes of devastation, pointing toward a territory that, having looked into the heart of a nightmare, has chosen to wake up and create a reality where such a nightmare can no longer exist. The narrative of her life remains, and it will continue to inspire those who strive for a world where every individual is treated with the dignity and respect they inherently deserve. This is the final, essential takeaway from the Newell domestic violence case, that every life is precious, that every act of violence leaves a permanent mark, and that the collective action of a compassionate community is the ultimate safeguard against the darkest impulses of the individual, serving as a beacon of progress for generations to come. The story of Fiapai Cruz, while tragic, is a story of a community that has chosen to rise, to learn, and to forever change the narrative of domestic life in American Samoa, ensuring that her memory will forever be a catalyst for good, a symbol of strength, and a guardian of the vulnerable in the years that follow. The echoes of the tragedy in Newell, while having solidified into the history of American Samoa, continue to serve as a profound and vital foundation for the ongoing cultural shift regarding domestic relations. To understand the full scope of this legacy, one must look beyond the immediate legal and societal responses and consider the long-term, structural changes that the territory has undertaken to ensure such a catastrophe remains an outlier rather than a precursor to a wider systemic failure. The institutionalization of support services for victims of domestic violence has evolved from a reactive, emergency-based model to a proactive, integrated framework of safety. This evolution represents a fundamental change in how the community perceives its duty to the individual. Where once the privacy of the home was held in such high regard that it often masked the presence of suffering, there is now an established understanding that the sanctity of the family unit is predicated on the safety of its most vulnerable members. The transition from a culture of silence to one of active protection is the most significant testament to the enduring impact of Fiapai Cruz's story. Educational initiatives have taken root in schools and community centers, aiming to equip the youth with a vocabulary and a framework for understanding healthy relationship dynamics before they encounter the complexities of adult life. These programs, which are frequently supported by the very advocacy organizations that emerged in the wake of the 2019 tragedy, emphasize the importance of autonomy, consent, and mutual respect. By addressing the roots of gender-based inequality early on, the territory is investing in a generation that is inherently less likely to view dominance as a legitimate component of leadership or love. This educational approach is complemented by professional development for law enforcement, healthcare providers, and social workers who are now better trained to identify the subtle, often hidden markers of domestic abuse. The goal is to move beyond the physical evidence of injury and toward an early intervention model that can provide support and resources long before an argument escalates to the point of lethal violence. The role of traditional leadership and the church in this evolution cannot be overstated. As cornerstones of Polynesian society, these institutions have the power to define cultural norms. The shift in their discourse, from a position of maintaining the status quo to one of active, public denunciation of violence, has been a critical component of the broader societal change. When religious leaders and village elders speak out against the mistreatment of women, it effectively removes the cultural shield that abusers have often used to justify their actions. This alignment between traditional authority and modern human rights standards has created a more unified front against domestic abuse, ensuring that there is no space within the community for the normalization of violence. The collective voice of these leaders serves as a powerful reminder that true strength lies not in the capacity to dominate others, but in the commitment to protect and empower them. Furthermore, the legal landscape in American Samoa has continued to be refined, with legislative bodies periodically revisiting the statutes related to family violence to ensure they remain robust and effective. The judiciary, empowered by the precedent set during the trial of Thomas Cruz, continues to handle such cases with a level of gravity that reflects the territory's intolerance for abuse. This consistent application of justice acts as a deterrent and sends a clear, unambiguous signal to the public that the law will not hesitate to hold perpetrators accountable. The stability and predictability of this legal environment are essential for fostering a society where victims feel empowered to step forward, knowing that the system is equipped to protect them and to see that justice is served. The resilience of this legal framework is a vital component of the overall strategy to secure a safer future for all citizens of the territory. As we examine the progress made since that somber June in 2019, it is evident that the transformation of the society is a continuous, iterative process. There is no final destination in this journey, as the challenges posed by deep-seated cultural beliefs and the complexity of human interaction are constant. However, the determination shown by the community to never return to the silence of the past is the driving force behind this ongoing change. The memory of Fiapai Cruz acts as a moral compass for this endeavor, ensuring that the focus remains on the dignity of the victim and the necessity of proactive intervention. Every workshop, every policy update, and every public conversation about the reality of domestic violence is a brick in the foundation of a safer, more equitable future for American Samoa. Looking forward, the focus must remain on the long-term support for those impacted by such trauma, particularly the children who are the silent victims of these domestic battles. Providing them with consistent, high-quality mental health resources, educational opportunities, and a supportive environment is a critical responsibility of the entire territory. Their stories, and the paths they carve for themselves despite their early experiences, will ultimately measure the success of the changes being implemented today. A society that provides for its most traumatized members is a society that truly honors the life of the lost. The commitment to these children is a commitment to the future, a way of breaking the cycle of violence and ensuring that the legacy of 2019 is one of healing rather than one of inherited suffering. The broader international community also observes the progress of American Samoa with interest, as the challenges faced by this Pacific territory are mirrored in many other societies grappling with the intersections of tradition, isolation, and domestic safety. The lessons learned from the Niuali case, specifically the power of the community to demand change and the efficacy of an integrated, multidisciplinary response to domestic violence, serve as a valuable case study for others. By sharing their experiences and their strategies for reform, the people of American Samoa are contributing to a global dialogue on the importance of human rights within the context of family and culture. The tragedy, while localized in its occurrence, has become a resonant part of the global effort to end the scourge of gender-based violence, reinforcing the fact that we are all, in some capacity, responsible for the safety of our neighbors. In conclusion, the journey from the depths of the 2019 tragedy to the current state of increased vigilance and protection is a testament to the power of human conscience. It is a reminder that even when the darkness of a crime seems total, the light of collective empathy and a commitment to justice can pierce the veil. The memory of Fiapai Cruz, preserved in the hearts of those who loved her and in the ongoing efforts of the community she left behind, remains a living, breathing force for good. Her story is no longer just a recounting of a life stolen, but a beacon guiding the way toward a future where every home in American Samoa can truly serve as a place of safety, respect, and enduring love. The resolve of the territory to stand against the tide of violence is a profound achievement, one that honors the past while steadfastly building a better world for the generations to come, ensuring that the sacrifice of those who have suffered is never in vain, and that the promise of a peaceful, equitable life is a reality that is accessible to all. As the territory continues to evolve, this commitment will remain its most significant hallmark, a permanent declaration that the safety of the individual is the heartbeat of a truly just society, and that silence is no longer an option in the face of injustice, no matter where it occurs or who it impacts. The legacy is secured in the actions taken each day to protect the vulnerable, to educate the young, and to stand together as a community that refuses to be defined by its tragedies, but instead is defined by its resilience and its unwavering pursuit of a life free from the shadows of violence. The path of history is often carved by the most devastating of circumstances, and the case of Fiapai Cruz stands as a testament to this heavy, unforgiving truth. As we reach the final reflection on this harrowing saga, we must confront the reality that the true measure of a society is found not in its moments of prosperity, but in its reactions to the darkness that threatens its core. The tragedy that took place in Niuali in 2019 was a collapse of the most fundamental social contract, an event so stark in its brutality that it rendered the previous norms of silence and avoidance entirely untenable. What followed was not merely a legal process, but a profound cultural reckoning that has continued to reshape the landscape of American Samoa. To look back at the arc of this case is to witness a community moving from the paralysis of shock to the active, determined construction of a safer future. The journey has been marked by a transition from the inward-looking, protective nature of family privacy to a forward-looking, communal commitment to transparency and individual safety. Central to this transformation is the realization that domestic violence is not a static phenomenon, but a fluid, pervasive force that requires constant, vigilant management. The legal precedents established during the trial of Thomas Cruz have served as a bedrock for this new awareness, providing a clear and uncompromising standard for the administration of justice. By upholding the highest levels of accountability, the judicial system has effectively communicated that the sanctuary of the home is not a lawless space, but one protected by the same principles of dignity and respect that govern all other aspects of public life. This legal clarity is the foundation upon which all other social efforts are built. It provides the necessary confidence for victims to speak out, knowing that the apparatus of the state is designed to shield them from further harm and to deliver a decisive resolution to their suffering. Without this judicial unwavering, the movement toward cultural change would lack the necessary authority to enforce the values it seeks to promote. However, the legal resolution is only one dimension of a much larger, multifaceted strategy. The real work, the day-to-day labor of creating a culture of safety, occurs in the conversations held at the kitchen table, in the lessons taught in classrooms, and in the guidance provided by the leaders of the community. The shift in perspective regarding gender roles and the importance of healthy relationships is perhaps the most significant outcome of the last several years. By systematically challenging the outdated patriarchal structures that once defined the parameters of familial interaction, American Samoa is cultivating a landscape where the autonomy and safety of the individual are paramount. This cultural evolution is a slow, steady process, but it is one that is clearly evident in the increased engagement of the public and the growing intolerance for any form of violence. The memory of Fiapai Cruz acts as a constant, gentle pressure on this process, reminding everyone of what is at stake when these values are neglected or abandoned. The children, those who witness the horror, remain the most significant stakeholders in this future. Their ongoing recovery is a collective responsibility, and the effort to surround them with care is a reflection of the territory's commitment to the next generation. By ensuring they have access to mental health resources and a stable, nurturing environment, the community is not only providing them with the opportunity to transcend their early experiences, but is also signaling that it values the potential of every child. This focus on the survivors is a clear indication that the community is no longer willing to let the consequences of domestic violence be an inherited burden. Instead, it is actively working to break the cycle, ensuring that the legacy of 2019 is one of restorative justice and the protection of the innocent. This is perhaps the most profound way to honor the mother who is lost, to guarantee that her children grow up in a world that is safer, more compassionate, and more protective than the one she was forced to leave. Looking toward the horizon, the sustainability of these reforms remains the most critical challenge. The initial burst of awareness and the immediate legislative response were essential, but the true test lies in the long-term dedication to these principles. The territory must continue to invest in the resources required for domestic safety, from the funding of advocacy organizations to the ongoing training of law enforcement. The institutions that have been built to support this mission must remain adaptable, capable of responding to the evolving nature of domestic threats and the changing needs of the community. This requires a level of persistence that is often harder to maintain than the initial emotional response. Yet, the resolve displayed by the people of American Samoa suggests that this is a challenge they are prepared to meet. The ongoing dialogue, the public events, and the persistent advocacy are all signs that the community has integrated the lessons of the Nu'uali case into its very identity. The global significance of this story cannot be ignored. In many parts of the world, domestic violence continues to be a largely invisible problem, shrouded in the silence of shame and social taboo. The American Samoan experience offers a model for how a community can confront its demons and emerge with a clearer, more resolute commitment to human rights. By documenting the process, by sharing the lessons learned, and by demonstrating the effectiveness of an integrated approach to social safety, the territory is contributing to a broader understanding of how to combat gender-based violence. The tragedy, while localized in its occurrence, has served to elevate the visibility of a global issue, providing a clear and encouraging example of the power of collective action. The resilience of the islands is an inspiration to those who work in the trenches of advocacy, providing evidence that the culture of violence is not immutable and that change is not only possible but inevitable when a community decides to stand together. As we conclude this exploration, we return to the figure of Fiapai Cruz, not as a victim to be pitted, but as a catalyst for a profound societal transformation. Her life, though cut short, has become an enduring symbol of the necessity of vigilance. The silence that once characterized the domestic sphere in Niuelau has been replaced by a chorus of voices that refuse to accept the status quo. This change is the most fitting tribute to her memory, a living legacy that continues to influence the lives of everyone in the territory. The pain of her loss will never fully dissipate, but it has been transmuted into a powerful force for good, a reminder that every life has the potential to leave a mark on the world, even in the most tragic of circumstances. The future of American Samoa, characterized by an increasing focus on the safety and dignity of the individual, is the final chapter in the story of her life, a chapter written by a community that has chosen, with absolute resolve, to honor her by ensuring that her story never repeats. This narrative, complex and heartbreaking as it may be, provides a blueprint for the future of any community struggling with the specter of domestic violence. It teaches that the first step is the recognition of the problem, the second is the breaking of the silence, and the third is the enduring commitment to creating a systemic defense against the darkness. The strength shown by the people of American Samoa is a beacon of progress, a reflection of the humanity that persists even in the wake of the most incomprehensible of tragedies. As they continue to move forward, their journey remains a vital part of the global movement for a more equitable and protective world. The story of Niuelau will continue to be told, not as a celebration of the crime, but as a reflection on the strength of the human spirit when it is united in the defense of the vulnerable and the pursuit of a world where every person, regardless of their circumstances, can walk in freedom, dignity, and safety, knowing that their community stands with them in the face of any threat. This is the ultimate, final goal, a world where the home is truly and permanently a place of peace, and where the memory of those we have lost serves as a reminder to cherish and protect every life, every day, in every possible way. The final chapter of this narrative is not defined by the conclusion of a case file or the cessation of a trial, but by the ongoing, persistent pulse of a community that has permanently altered its trajectory. As we cast our perspective toward the future, the memory of Fiapai Cruz acts as a silent, unwavering witness to the progress of American Samoa. The transformation of the territory from a place where silence was the default into a space where accountability and protection are paramount is a monumental achievement, one that reflects a deep, collective maturation. This journey has not been linear, nor has it been devoid of pain, but it has been characterized by a steadfast refusal to revert to the shadows. Every day, as community members engage in the work of supporting one another, protecting the vulnerable, and maintaining the systems of safety that have been constructed, they are continuing the work that began in the immediate, agonizing aftermath of the events of June 2019. The legacy of this incident is woven into the very fabric of the islands, a constant reminder that the health of the whole is dependent on the safety of the individual, and that the sanctity of the home is a standard that must be upheld with unyielding courage. The infrastructure of support that now exists in the territory, ranging from specialized counseling services to robust legislative protections, is the physical manifestation of this societal resolve. It is no longer an abstract ideal to speak of safety, it is an operational reality. Law enforcement agencies, in their daily interactions with the public, now operate with a heightened awareness of the indicators of abuse, treating each case with the seriousness and sensitivity that the situation demands. This proactive posture is a direct result of the lessons learned, a testament to the fact that the territory has internalized the reality of domestic violence as a critical public health and safety issue. The commitment to training, to resource allocation, and to the continuous improvement of response protocols ensures that the systems in place are not static, but are capable of growing and adapting to the evolving nature of the challenges they face. This is the hallmark of a resilient and responsible community, one that is not content with the status quo but is actively seeking to improve the conditions under which its people live, work, and raise their families. In the realm of culture and tradition, the evolution is perhaps even more subtle, yet equally profound. The dialogue concerning the roles of men and women within the family unit has moved toward a more equitable model, one that emphasizes partnership and mutual respect rather than the archaic, power-based hierarchies that once dominated. This shift is not just reflected in public discourse, but is increasingly evident in the daily interactions of the people, from the way disputes are mediated to the way community leaders mentor the youth. By grounding these conversations in the values of empathy, integrity, and the fundamental worth of every human being, the community is building a cultural foundation that is inherently resistant to the toxicity of abuse. This is the work of generations, a slow but steady process of cultural renewal that is being championed by individuals who understand that the future of the islands is tied to the strength and the harmony of their homes. The resilience demonstrated by the family of Fiaparai Cruz and the grace with which they have navigated their journey through loss and into a life defined by purpose remains a source of inspiration for many. They have transformed their private grief into a public commitment, ensuring that her life is remembered not for the way it ended, but for the impact it continues to have on the lives of others. Their advocacy, their resilience, and their willingness to share their story are vital components of the community's healing process. In their strength, one can see the potential for all families to overcome even the most devastating of circumstances. Their courage is a reminder that while loss is inevitable, the manner in which one chooses to move forward is a personal and powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. They have become the stewards of a memory that is now a catalyst for positive change, and their contribution to the ongoing dialogue about domestic safety is perhaps the most significant part of the territory's journey toward healing. As we look at the broader implications of this case, it is clear that American Samoa is contributing to a global understanding of how to address the complexities of domestic violence in small, tight-knit communities. The challenges posed by limited resources, the pressures of tradition, and the difficulties of balancing public safety with family privacy are universal, and the territory's experience serves as a valuable case study in how to navigate these tensions. By focusing on the integration of various sectors, legal, religious, social, and educational, the territory has created a model that is both practical and aspirational. It demonstrates that a community, when united by a shared purpose and a clear understanding of the necessity of change, can overcome the most entrenched of social problems. The success of this model is not measured by the absence of challenges, but by the strength and the effectiveness of the response when those challenges arise. It is a story of hope, a beacon of progress that continues to shine far beyond the shores of the Pacific. The ongoing commitment to education, to the empowerment of women, and to the active participation of men in the prevention of violence is a cornerstone of this future. By fostering a culture where every member of the community feels empowered to speak out against injustice, the territory is creating an environment where abuse cannot thrive. This is the most effective form of prevention, the creation of a societal norm that is fundamentally incompatible with the dynamics of domestic violence. As this culture continues to take root, it will become the default setting for the community, ensuring that the next generation of children grows up in an environment where safety and respect are the givens, not the exceptions. This is the ultimate goal, the vision that drives the work of advocates, policymakers, and community leaders alike, a future where the trauma of the past is no longer a reality for the children of the present. In reflecting on the trajectory of this entire narrative, one cannot help but be moved by the transformation that has taken place. It is a story of a community that has looked into the heart of its own darkness and decided to illuminate the path forward with the light of its collective conscience. The death of Fiaparai Cruz, while a tragedy of the highest order, has become the foundation upon which a new, more resilient society is being built. Her life, once confined to the private sphere of her home, now serves as the inspiration for a public mission that transcends the individual and impacts the entire territory. This is the final, most meaningful conclusion we can draw from this examination, that the life of one person can, in the end, change everything. It is a reminder of the inherent power of the human connection, the capacity of a community to mobilize for the greater good, and the enduring strength of the values that define us. As we move forward, the memory of what happened in Newell will remain a steady, sobering guide, ensuring that the progress made is never taken for granted. The community's journey is far from over, but the direction is clear, and the resolve to continue is firm. The territory stands as a beacon, a living, breathing testament to the idea that a society can indeed transcend its past, that it can confront its realities with honesty, and that it can commit itself to the noble, demanding task of protecting its most vulnerable members. This is the ultimate fulfillment of the commitment to justice, the true resolution of a case that has redefined the standards of safety and care in American Samoa. It is a legacy of empowerment, a heritage of hope, and a promise kept to the memory of those who have suffered that their experiences will be the catalyst for a safer, more equitable, and more profoundly compassionate world. The story of Fiapai Cruz and the response of her community will continue to echo as a profound lesson in the strength of the collective heart, the necessity of the courage to speak, and the immutable value of a single, precious life in the eyes of a society that has finally chosen to truly care. As we close this account, we do so with the knowledge that the work continues, that the community is steadfast, and that the light that has been kindled will continue to guide the way for all who seek a future defined by safety, dignity, and enduring peace for everyone in the islands and beyond. As the final chapter of this profound and sobering exploration concludes, we are left with the undeniable realization that the tragedy in Newell has irrevocably altered the moral and social landscape of American Samoa. The arc of this narrative, stretching from the harrowing events of June 2019 to the present day, is a testament to the resilience of a people who refuse to let the darkness of a single night define the future of their nation. When we consider the breadth of the changes, the judicial precedents, the legislative shifts, the cultural transformation, and the collective awakening of the community, we see a society that has undergone a fundamental metamorphosis. This process was not easy, nor was it swift. It required a painful, systematic excavation of long-held beliefs, a courageous confrontation with internal contradictions, and an unwavering commitment to the safety of the most vulnerable. The legacy of Fiapai Cruz, while forged in the crucible of unimaginable loss, has become a cornerstone of a new societal identity, one that values the sanctity of life above the preservation of silence. The institutionalization of these changes is perhaps the most enduring aspect of the territory's response. By integrating domestic violence prevention into the daily functioning of its schools, churches, and government offices, American Samoa has created a robust system of defense that operates well beyond the scope of individual crisis. The commitment to a multidisciplinary approach, involving law enforcement, healthcare providers, social services, and community advocates, ensures that support is not merely reactive but is embedded in the cultural and legal fabric of the islands. This systemic resilience is the true mark of success for a territory that has decided to prioritize the well-being of its citizens. The transition from a culture where domestic matters were private affairs to one where they are recognized as matters of public concern and shared responsibility is the ultimate outcome of the collective work that began in the wake of the 2019 catastrophe. Furthermore, the evolving role of community leadership in this ongoing narrative is a crucial factor in the sustainability of these reforms. Village elders, religious leaders, and civic figures who have aligned themselves with the principles of safety and respect have provided a powerful cultural endorsement for the changes taking place. This alignment has been vital in bridging the gap between traditional values and modern expectations of human rights. By framing the protection of the family as a moral imperative consistent with the core tenets of their faith and heritage, these leaders have successfully neutralized the cultural excuses that often allow abuse to flourish. This leadership, combined with the tireless advocacy of community-based organizations, creates an environment where the social costs of domestic violence are clear and the benefits of a culture built on mutual respect and open communication are increasingly tangible for all residents. As we evaluate the broader impact of the story, we must recognize that the journey is continuous. The challenge of maintaining this level of vigilance is a constant, as the factors that contribute to domestic tension, ranging from economic pressures to mental health issues and the complexities of interpersonal dynamics, remain persistent features of human existence. However, the difference now lies in the collective capacity of the community to manage these stressors without resorting to the lethal violence of the past. The existence of a support network that is ready to intervene, combined with an educational framework that empowers individuals to recognize and reject abusive behaviors, serves as a dynamic, evolving buffer against the return of the old ways. The territory is now better equipped to handle the realities of human struggle, not by suppressing them, but by providing the tools and the support needed to navigate them safely. The children, those silent witnesses who were the most affected by the events of that night, remain the primary focus of the community's long-term commitment. Their growth, their resilience, and their ability to find their own paths despite their early trauma serve as the ultimate metric of the community's success. The support they have received is a reflection of the territory's understanding that its future is inextricably linked to their well-being. By ensuring that their needs are met, that their stories are treated with dignity, and that they are given every opportunity to thrive, the community is not only providing them with a future, but is also actively working to break the cycle of intergenerational trauma. Their survival and eventual flourishing are the living proof that even in the aftermath of total devastation, hope can be cultivated and new life can be built upon the foundations of care, support, and the enduring strength of the community. The story of the Newell domestic violence case has transcended its origins, becoming a standard by which the territory measures its progress and its values. It is a story that has been told and retold, each time reinforcing the lessons learned and strengthening the resolve to prevent a repeat of the past. The public's continued engagement with the narrative is a sign of its importance, a way for the community to keep the memory of Fiapai Cruz alive while ensuring that the lessons of her death are constantly renewed. Her story is no longer just a record of a crime. It is an active, influential force in the shaping of American Samoa's cultural and legal trajectory. This is the ultimate, final goal of every effort made since 2019, to ensure that the memory of what happened is not just a source of grief, but a permanent, guiding light toward a future of safety, dignity, and peace for everyone in the territory. In looking at the international response and the interest that this case has generated, we see that American Samoa has become an unlikely, yet powerful, case study for the rest of the world. The challenges of a small, close-knit society facing the issues of domestic violence are not unique to this territory. They are universal. The model of reform that has emerged, characterized by the integration of traditional values with modern legal and human rights standards, is one that others can adapt and build upon. The willingness of the people of American Samoa to be transparent about their struggles and their successes is a contribution to the global dialogue, reinforcing the fact that no community is immune to these issues and that every community has the power to act. The story of Newell, in this sense, has become a global narrative of courage and the capacity for transformation. We conclude this exploration with a deep sense of reverence for the life that was taken and a profound appreciation for the community that has emerged from the darkness of this tragedy. The journey of American Samoa since 2019 is a story of human endurance, a testament to the fact that societies are capable of immense change when they are driven by the values of justice, compassion, and the fundamental respect for human dignity. While the events of that June night remain a source of deep sadness, the response to them has become a source of immense pride and progress. The commitment to building a world where the home is truly a sanctuary is the ultimate, final goal, and the territory's journey toward that end is a beacon for all who seek a more equitable and protective future. As the community continues to walk this path, they carry with them the memory of the past, the resolve of the present, and the hope for a future that is defined by safety, dignity, and a shared commitment to the value of every life. This is the enduring, final, and most essential message of this story, that even when the darkness seems overwhelming, the collective commitment to change can lead the way, and that justice, when pursued with honesty and persistence, is the bridge to a better world for everyone for all time. The life of Fiapoi Cruz was a beginning, not an end, and the legacy she has left behind is one that will continue to guide the people of American Samoa for generations to come, standing as a final, silent, and powerful guardian of the peace, safety, and human dignity that every individual deserves. The profound and enduring legacy of the Newell domestic violence case lies not in the finality of the courtroom verdict, but in the ripple effects that have fundamentally recalibrated the social and cultural heart of American Samoa. As we reflect upon the long journey this community has traversed since the harrowing events of June 2019, it becomes clear that this is a story of metamorphosis, one where an unimaginable tragedy served as the crucible for a collective reawakening. The transition from a society marked by a culture of silence, where the sanctity of the home often functioned as an impenetrable barrier to public intervention, to a society that explicitly champions transparency, protection, and the unyielding dignity of the individual, is a landmark achievement. This shift is not merely a legal or policy-based update. It represents a deep-seated change in the island's consciousness, a fundamental reevaluation of what it means to be a neighbor, a family member, and a citizen within a community that has looked directly into the face of horror and chosen a different path forward. The infrastructure of support that has been systematically woven into the fabric of the islands, from the increased training of law enforcement to the expansion of specialized counseling and social services, is a direct, ongoing response to the lessons learned from the life and death of Fiapoi Cruz. These systems, designed to be proactive rather than merely reactive, serve as a constant reminder that the responsibility to prevent domestic violence is a shared, communal endeavor. The integration of domestic violence prevention into school curricula and community programming is particularly significant, as it marks an investment in the next generation, aiming to dismantle the toxic patterns that can be passed down through families. By fostering an early understanding of consent, empathy, and healthy conflict resolution, the territory is actively working to ensure that the dynamics of dominance and abuse become a relic of the past, rather than a recurring feature of interpersonal life. This work is the embodiment of a commitment to the future, a way of ensuring that the trauma of the past does not become the reality of the next generation. The role of traditional and religious leaders in this evolution cannot be emphasized enough, as their endorsement of these societal shifts has provided the cultural legitimacy necessary for change to take hold at every level. When the pulpits and the community gatherings explicitly denounce domestic abuse as a betrayal of faith and a violation of the community's core values, they provide an essential counter-narrative to the archaic, power-based hierarchies that once permitted violence to occur in the shadows. This alignment between the cultural pillars of the territory and the modern imperatives of human rights has been transformative, creating a unified societal stance that leaves no room for the rationalization or the excuse-making that historically allowed perpetrators to avoid accountability. The collective voice of these leaders reinforces the idea that true strength and true leadership are found in the protection of the vulnerable, not in the subjugation of those who are meant to be nurtured. As we assess the ongoing efforts, we must acknowledge that the sustainability of these reforms remains the most critical objective. The energy and the focus that were mobilized in the immediate aftermath of the 2019 tragedy were necessary, but the challenge now lies in the daily, persistent maintenance of these principles. The community's commitment to this long-term mission is evident in the sustained advocacy, the periodic legislative updates, and the ongoing public discourse that ensures the issue of domestic violence remains firmly on the agenda. It is a commitment that requires vigilance, adaptability, and the willingness to face the reality that societal change is an iterative process that never fully reaches a point of total completion. Yet, the persistence of the community in this work is a source of profound hope, a testament to the belief that progress is not only possible, but is the inevitable outcome of a society that refuses to be defined by its tragedies. The narrative of this case has also had a broader impact, touching upon the international dialogue surrounding gender-based violence and the unique challenges faced by small, closely integrated communities. The experience of American Samoa provides a valuable and compelling example of how a community can confront its internal demons and emerge with a clearer, more resolute commitment to human rights. By sharing their story, the people of the territory are not only honoring the memory of those they have lost, but are also contributing to a global understanding of the importance of community-led reform. The resilience shown by the people of American Samoa is a beacon for others who are struggling with similar issues, offering a roadmap for how to move from a place of isolation and silence to one of open, active, and protective engagement. The lessons learned here are not local, they are universal, and they carry a weight that resonates across borders and cultures. Reflecting on the life of Fiapai Cruz, one is struck by the ordinary nature of her existence, a life characterized by the love of her children, the ties to her community, and the promise of a future that was violently snatched away. Her story has become a permanent feature of the island's history, a somber reminder of the fragility of the human experience and the profound, rippling impact of one life taken in injustice. Her memory, while inextricably linked to the agony of her final days, is now the guiding star for a movement that is built on the foundation of compassion, accountability, and the protection of every individual's right to safety. This is a transformation that honors her existence in the most meaningful way possible, ensuring that her life and her story continue to have a profound, lasting impact on the world around her, forever shaping the way her community lives and interacts. As we look toward the future, the promise of a society where the home is a true sanctuary remains the ultimate, final goal. The efforts being made to ensure that every individual, regardless of their circumstances, can walk in dignity and safety are the building blocks of this new, evolving societal identity. The resilience of the people of American Samoa, their ability to process pain, to enact change, and to hold one another accountable is a reflection of the strength that resides within the collective spirit. It is a spirit that has been tested in the fires of a tragedy, but has emerged clearer, stronger, and more determined than ever before. This is the legacy of the Niuelau case, that when a community chooses to stand together in the face of darkness, it has the power to define its own destiny and to create a reality that is fundamentally more just, more safe, and more profoundly human than the one it left behind. In the final analysis, the story of Niuelau is one that is constantly being written, each day an opportunity for the community to reaffirm its commitment to the principles of safety, dignity, and mutual respect. The resolution of the legal case was merely the beginning of this ongoing work, and the continued progress is a reflection of the dedication of every individual who has chosen to play a part in this societal renewal. As the territory moves forward, it carries with it the lessons of the past, the resolve of the present, and the enduring hope for a future that is defined by the absolute safety of its people. This is the lasting, final message of this story, that change is not only possible, but it is an essential part of the human journey, and that by working together, by speaking out, and by refusing to accept anything less than the full protection of every life, we can indeed build a world that is worthy of the memories of those we have lost. The memory of Fiapai Cruz will forever be a part of this story, a permanent, guiding force in the ongoing mission to ensure that no other life is stolen in the same devastating way, and that every home in the islands remains, as it should be, a place of peace, love, and unwavering security for everyone who enters, today and for all generations yet to come. The work of healing and of protecting, once started, must never end, and as American Samoa continues its journey, it remains an inspiring example of how a community can rise above its darkest moments to become a beacon of light, resilience, and unyielding hope for the entire world to see.